Hello there, duelists. I've played Yu-Gi-Oh! For its entire existence, and there's nothing like nostalgia to give you that warm, fuzzy, trading card feeling that everything's gonna be okay. At Christmas, I picked up 3 Battle City Speed Duel boxes, a product crammed with nostalgia. And from there, I really couldn't get enough of the kind of Speed Duel format. So I'm going to be profiling a few of my Speed Duel decks, just to make this channel even more niche. I really like Speed Duels. It harkens back to a simpler game when you were building, when you were 10 years old, and the building and collecting is far easier, just because of a trimmed down card pool, the prices of the cards being far less than the TCG counterparts. So I'm going to do something a little bit different in today's, well, one of today's videos, in that I'm just going to run through the Speed Dueling format briefly, just so that when someone who hasn't seen the Speed Duel profile before comes across, they don't go, what the hell is this guy doing? He doesn't have a clue what's going on. He surely needs 40 cards in his deck. So Speed Dueling kind of spawned out of the Duel Links format, which is the online, well, it's the only official online video game that Konami produces for Yu-Gi-Oh! So in that, the field only has 3 slots for monsters and 3 slots for spells and traps, which obviously means that you've got kind of less flexibility and less room to play your cards, so that's something I suppose you've got to be a little bit careful with, although it doesn't come up that often. Some of the other major factors are the fact that, like in Duel Links, you only start with 4,000 life points, which means that if you're not careful about it, your opponent can easily, steal a game from you if your wits aren't about you. Because even in, kind of the Duel Links and the Speed Dueling formats, the size of the monster attacks isn't that much less than the standard TCG card game. In terms of, your bog standard vanilla normal summon can be an 18 or 1900 beat stick. A couple of the other reductions are the fact that the main deck is only between 20 and 30 cards. Obviously, in comparison to main decks being traditionally 40 to 60 cards, which this greatly impacts your kind of deck building choices. So a 3 of in a traditional TCG deck, you'll pull in your starting hand about 25% of the time, I would say, something like that, although I'm definitely going to get the maths wrong here. However, if you play a 3 of in a 20 card deck, the odds of drawing that card are way, way higher. So even a 3 of and a really, really solid card might actually not be a 3 of in Speed Dueling. And it means that the decks that you're actually putting together tend to be more consistent, just because, there's less randomization. You've got half of the cards in which to draw from. Having said that, on the flip side of it, the starting hands are also reduced. So unlike in the standard card game, where you will draw 5 cards for your opening hand, and then if you're going second, you will also draw a card. In Speed Dueling, you will only draw 4 cards, and then if you're going second, you will also gain that additional draw. So as much as your deck is more consistent, your hands might not be, just because of the fact that you're only drawing 4 cards out of your deck. And the final thing that is different, that the Speed Dueling format's kind of inherited from Duel Links, is the addition of skill cards. So these are cards that are based on, kind of like the anime characters' skills, for lack of a better word, or in reference to the first season, cheating. So these are things that can have a huge impact on the state of the game, and Speed Duels, I would say, unlike Duel Links, the skills actually vastly change the scope of the way that you build a deck, and also the outcome of games, whereas some of the skills in terms of Duel Links kind of tend to be on the periphery, so they will definitely aid a deck, but they're not necessarily the core to a deck. So we've kind of discussed, the differences in the mechanics. From here, we're just kind of a quick breeze past the different kind of like cards that are currently in the Speed Dueling format. So as kind of stated, the latest set that's come out that was the end of last year was the Battle City box, which kind of covers a lot of the cards that were kind of in that season of the original anime. So I think, unlike the traditional card game where you're constantly getting new and newer cards, the speed dueling format has tended to reprint quite a few of the original cards just over and over and over again. Rogue Doll has got multiple reprints in the speed dueling format, which seems a bit strange because even then it's never going to be played. But I think on top of that, you've also kind of got like a filtered card pool as well. So cards that maybe were too powerful or affected the game in a kind of adverse way have not been introduced into the speed dueling format. For example, MST isn't in the speed dueling format, but Cosmic Cyclone is, and that was one of the cards that got released, in the latest Battle City box. So although some might say that Cosmic Cyclone is a better card, especially in the TCG at the moment, the fact that it's got such a high cost associated with playing the card. So 1,000 life points is a quarter of the life points that you will have in total in a speed dueling duel, which means that playing Cosmic Cyclone isn't just a case of just throwing it down, absolutely zero consequence. You do have to be careful about when you play the card. I think that building a deck is also a bit easier in the speed dueling format. So speed duels have about 700 cards to pick from, unlike the over 10,000 cards that the traditional TCG format has. Which means that when you're building a deck, you don't need to rifle through thousands and thousands of cards finding old text from 10 years ago. You've got 700 cards to pick from, and that's that. Although, like the TCG, I would say that quite a lot of the cards are not useful. I would estimate about 60 to 70% of the cards in the speed dueling card pool are not usable. And kind of like finally, I'm going to discuss one of my favourite parts of the speed dueling format, and that's the cost. I've been playing, as I said, the TCG card game for a very long time, between playing with absolute garbage from the starter decks, the Yuki and Kaiba starter decks, right the way through to, the first structure deck, the Zombie and Red Eyes structure decks, right the way through to, kind of building more modern meta decks, and obviously the price has gone up and up and up as I've been playing. Obviously that doesn't necessarily mean that the older, formats were cheaper, but just in general, the main Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG card game is really expensive. And for, newer players or younger players, that's just not viable, and I think that that's a real sad state of the game. Speed dueling, on the other side of the coin, is really cheap. So I think for maybe $60 to $70, depending, you could pick up 3 Battle City boxes and be well on your way to being able to build a lot of different decks. I really rate the product. I mean, it has got a lot of rubbish in it, but I think in general it's got all of the components that you would need to build a substantial amount of decks and get a lot of variety from it. Alternatively, you could, buy the decks as singles, and because the cards are relatively fixed in terms of they're not, I think there are about 4 main speed duel sets, and all of them are quite small, and the number of hollows is actually quite limited, and even the hollows that are, in demand and expensive, as maybe you'd call it, are only about $15 maximum. Unlike, your kind of $100 in the main card sets. But most of the cards you can get from speed duels, for a fact that you're going to be able to get. So they're in dedicated deck boxes in terms of they're not random, you will always get them, which reduces the price considerably. On top of that, the decks are obviously only 20 cards. So, instead of buying 40 $1 cards, you are buying 20 $1 cards. So most of the speed duel decks will run you about $10 to $20, which is miles better than the equivalent in the TCG. Okay, so wrapping up. I may just be getting my kicks out of nostalgia from this, but opening up some of the speed duel sets is some of the best kind of times I've had opening product recently. And the number of decks that you can build just from, you know, from the structured products has really got me kind of hooked on the Speed Duel format. The fact that you can pretty much build every single deck as well is definitely a completionist dream. There's no way I'd consider, you know, collecting all of the TCG trading cards, but getting all of the Speed Duel cards is actually viable. So if you'll bear with it, I'm going to do some Speed Duel profiles on the channel. It's kind of what I want to do, and it's a bit nicher than the standard trading card game, but who cares? It's all for a good time, isn't it? Thanks for watching / listening, and hope you tune in for